Welcome to this Rehab Management video news brief. I'm Frank Long, Editorial Director for Rehab Management. More than 80 physical therapists from across the nation gathered in Los Angeles recently for the Empower Educational Series, sponsored by outpatient rehab business solutions provider Clinicient. One of the primary aims of this business-focused conference was to provide experts to help coach practices to improve their positions in the landscape of healthcare providers. Rehab Management was on site April 30th for day one of the two-day seminar, which featured among many speakers Nancy Beckley, Jerry Durham, and Sturdy McKee. Each of these experts took a moment with Rehab Management to share highlights from their presentations. The first with whom we spoke was Jerry Durham, co-founder of San Francisco's Spine and Sport. Durham told us about the identity crisis he says is going on in PT and the need to define the value of physical therapy in a way that prospective patients will grasp and act on.
We as physical therapists definitely have an identity crisis in this country, and no one can argue with that. How are you different than yoga? How are you different than the personal trainer? Why shouldn't I go to the chiro? All those other things, the massage therapist. I see we have an association to deal with that, and lots of people working on that. I believe the best we can do as individual PTs is begin to establish what our value is in our clinics, in our workspace. You don't have to be a practice owner to do this, but you need to decide what is the value I bring to people. Is it my hands-on skills? Is it that I give everybody a cup of coffee when they get here? Is it that I'm going to become your best friend? Whatever it is, you have to decide what your value is and let people know and blow that up through a megaphone to everybody out there that I am a physical therapist and this is what I offer. Let me give you an example.
Durham's business partner and seminar speaker Sturdy McKee also spoke to us between sessions. McKee had this to say about the importance of therapists consciously reconnecting with forces that keep them motivated.
So one of the things we talked about today was getting in touch with your why, your purpose. And I think it's very important for all of us in rehab to remember why we became therapists in the first place. Why did we get involved in this profession? Too often we can go down roads of having to chase compliance or the latest billing rules or documentation, all these other pieces that are building blocks to doing what we do, but not losing sight of our purpose and our why and what drove us to become therapists in the first place is really critically important to maintain your motivation and not burning out.
Finally, we sat with Nancy Beckley just after her presentation. Beckley shared several important observations about what practices can do to minimize the probability of being blindsided by compliance issues, which can have very costly consequences. She begins with a few cautionary tips about profiling and the always present potential of an audit brought on by a whistleblower.
Frank, everybody's profiling everybody these days. Big data's out there, data is everywhere, and the Affordable Care Act has made data very transparent from the federal agencies that you bill, like Medicare, Medicaid, and TRICARE. So if they're profiling you and you're not profiling yourself across a number of high-risk parameters, which you've discovered from your risk assessment, you could likely be a target and really not even understand why or how it happened when they came knocking at your door. Frank, a whistleblower is what's called a qui tam relator. They're acting on behalf of the government to bring what they feel is a problem against somebody where they have prima facie evidence that something has gone wrong. And if the government, following their investigation, intervenes in the case and decides to sue the provider, the relator or the whistleblower will get up to 33% of the proceeds. So it can be big dollar monies, as we've learned in the Health South case, as well as the physiotherapy case and some lesser cases. So what does a small practice need to be concerned about? Well, first off, when you hire therapists, are you training them to understand how to bill, how to document, how to schedule, and a good understanding of the federal health care requirements that therapists must know? You must start there. People can come to your practice with understandings from their previous place of employment. And you would rather have them have your rules, your policies, and your understanding at your practice, and of course assuming that your practice has a good understanding of the federal health care rules and your Medicare contractors rules. So you want to make sure that all of your employees understand this, because when they come to you and ask a question, you can say, here's our policy, here's how we do it. And when the employee said, well, I always was told at school or at this employment, you say, well, we've researched, we have the Medicare policies, this is how we do it according to policy. That can potentially prevent that type of whistleblower. Then there's the other whistleblower that may feel that you have not listened to them. They may come to you and say, I think that we are using the aids appropriately when treating Medicare patients. And if you just brush that person off, don't listen to their concern, and they continue to express those concerns, that's the person that leaves your employ and at some point in the future contacts a whistleblower attorney, goes straight to the Department of Justice, or calls 1-800-HHS-TIPS and says, I used to work here and I continually told them this is wrong and they wouldn't listen to me. So depending on which U.S. Attorney's district that you're in, they're going to take a look at this. It's going to be reviewed at the Department of Justice, or what's called Big Justice in Washington, D.C., and they're going to look at any potential civil or criminal implications while the local office investigates, while the complaint is under seal. If the local United States Attorney decides to intervene, then it is unsealed. You may not know who the whistleblower is at that particular time while they're investigating, but once it's unsealed, you will. So it's really important to prevent a whistleblower, to do as much as you can to educate your employees, let them know your expectations and your policies and procedures for documentation, billing, coding, and scheduling with patients that are in federal health care programs.
And if you've been thinking about getting your compliance information from random sources on the internet, Nancy has some advice for you.
Internet chat rooms or listservs or places where people can exchange information, Yahoo groups and Google groups and whatnot, are great places for people to get basic information and to be pointed in the right direction. However, if you go to one of those groups and ask, how do I do this? And you haven't bothered to check the underlying Medicare Benefits Policy Manual or the Medicare Claims Processing Manual, and you rely on advice wherein somebody says, well, I think you do it this way, or I'm sure we do it that way, or we do it this way at our facility, or somebody that just blatantly offers their opinion, you might actually be putting yourself in jeopardy. Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General, and the like routinely monitor coding chat rooms and other chat rooms to determine if there's people seeking advice there rather than seeking advice from the proper authorities. So what does that mean? It means that if you have an issue and you have a concern and you step forward with the government and say, oh my goodness, I didn't know that, and they said, well, yes, you did. You sought advice from this chat room rather than relying on the proper authority. So my advice to everybody is, chat rooms are great places to get basic information and to have people point you in the right direction, but you must rely on policy manuals, Code of Federal Regulations, and the underlying statutory authority, which is the law. It will serve you well.
This has been a Rehab Management Video News Brief.